Hi, everybody. Welcome to this latest episode of Real Talk with Rick. I am pleased to announce that I was able to bring in our Eden Prairie's fire chief, our new fire chief, Scott Gerber. Scott started about 4 months ago from this taping, the spring of 2019. He followed our longtime and first-time full-time fire chief, George Espenson, upon his retirement. And Scott is new to the city of Eden Prairie, our new fire chief, but as you'll hear in the podcast, he's not new to emergency management and the fire service in general. So Scott talks about the Eden Prairie Fire Department and our operations. He talks a little bit about his career leading up to Eden Prairie and some of his outside interests and passions. So this is your chance to meet our new Eden Prairie Fire Chief, Scott Gerber. Chief Scott Gerber, welcome.
Thanks, Rick. Good to be here.
Yeah, thanks for coming in. Now, I thought this is going to be kind of a unique experience for you to be a part of a podcast. I'm sure it still is, but I think you told me just like 30 seconds ago that you have members of your family that are doing podcasting. This is nothing unique or special. You've got a podcaster in your family now.
It's really unique and special for me, though, because I'm trying to keep up to my 26-year-old son who's running a podcast, sitting in your seat where he's doing the interviewing. So, yeah, here he is, one of the sportscasters out at Penn State University, running a podcast, and here I am in the city of Eden Prairie helping to be part of your podcast.
It's good. It's a good synergy. Now, but he just started this? Penn State just started a podcast.
Brand new podcast, unrivaled. Yep. So we're going to be rivaling their podcast.
We are. If you're interested in the city of Eden Prairie and Penn State football, we've got 2 podcasts for you. You are the Eden Prairie Fire Chief.
Thanks.
Yeah. Thanks. Like you weren't so sure, yeah. Or you're not. Still new, though, so I think the thanks has to do with you're a new guy here.
Only 4 months in.
4 months in.
Yeah,
so have you found? Do you know where all the fire stations are?
I do know where all the fire stations are.
Okay.
I still have trouble sometimes knowing where all the streets are because with the many cul-de-sacs that we have in our city, sometimes I don't find all the right streets. But I have found all the fire stations, so that's good.
But if you jump on a truck or you get in a car, they'll take you to the right place. You don't have to lead the way.
No, I generally don't have to lead the way, and thank goodness that we have such great technology in this city because we can help find those spots by all you got to do is press the button and it helps give me directions. Turn right, turn left.
Turn right, yeah. Turn left, you'll get there. Well, no, thanks for coming on after, as you just said, having been here for 4 months. I feel like from my perspective, you've been here for a lot longer than that. So that's a compliment because I think you hit the ground running. You're doing a great job.
It has been hitting the ground running, and I would say sometimes I feel the same way. Sometimes it feels like I've been here for years, and other times it feels like I just started yesterday. As you know, though, a great city with great people. I was able and have been very welcomed into an organization that has awesome firefighters who care about what they do and care about our community. I think certainly many who may listen to this may not know that as a fire department, we run a duty crew fire department with 107 people. 98 of those folks are duty crew firefighters, and 9 of them are full-time. We're able to provide coverage 24 hours a day for people that may have a bad day that's happened somewhere in our city. And so we don't staff all 4 of our stations, but certainly we staff our stations based on times of day and days of the week, sometimes based on the analytics, if you will, of what happens certain times of the day to be able to make sure that we have good response. We're able to do that with our duty crew firefighters who I think bring one of the great uniquenesses to our community because they're community connected. It's not their full-time job. They all have another full-time job that they have, and they're able to bring in with 98 different personalities and 98 different skill sets. Oftentimes as a fire department, we're there to try to solve a problem. And so when we're able to solve that problem, you got 98 different folks to be able to come at that maybe in a little bit different way. And oftentimes, right, we don't have all 98 at the same time. But certainly to have different skill sets with different walks of life with where they come from is a pretty neat deal.
Sure. And going into that, I'm going to ask you to explain a little bit of what you mean by duty crew, because I I think people might understand, the two, there normally had been for years and years and years, probably the two facets of a fire department. It's a full-time department, full-time employee, that's their job all the time for that city, be it, Minneapolis or St. Paul. Then you would hear about a volunteer fire department, of which many suburbs and cities in greater Minnesota have volunteer, not truly volunteer. Some people think that, but like you said, they had other jobs. This was something that they volunteered for on the side from what they normally do to respond to calls when calls came. This duty crew model we have, it's almost, 8 years old now, 7, 8 years old, but it's a little bit different, right? It's still, as you said, it's not a full-time position, but there's some staffing involved, right?
Very much so. In the state of Minnesota, there's about 780 fire departments. Of those 780, there's only about 19 that are all career, meaning they have people that are at their stations 24 hours a day. Places like St. Paul, Minneapolis, Rochester, Duluth, some of those bigger communities that have all career departments. Then there's that other extreme you talked about that are mostly all volunteer. Much of greater Minnesota where that's that community lifeblood that provides that service in the community. And then there's this group in between, which the city of Eden Prairie sits in, and that's that paid on call duty crew combination model. So we have some full-time staff and many of that duty crew are paid on call model. So it's not their full-time job. So with our duty crew staff and those 98 folks, what I think is probably one of the uniquest and I think critical to where we are today and where we're going is people's lives are so much different than what they were before. So Eden Prairie Fire, 52 years old, and we think about that, that's a long time. But if you compare that with other fire departments around us in our suburban area, you have others that are around us like Chaska that's almost 150 years old. You have Excelsior that's 127 years old. So there's a number of departments that have even longer roots. But things 100 and some years ago have changed to where they are today. And that person who maybe grew up in that city, who were able to, maybe their grandpa served or their dad served. We have some of that in our 52-year history with what's there.
Sure.
But people's time is so much different today. People in their jobs, both spouses or significant others are working outside the house. Their kids are involved in activities and athletics, and so it takes them away nights and weekends where maybe they were in the community before. Now, the difference in what we offer with that duty crew model is it gives people flexibility. So the flexibility is such that people can then schedule their time. So we ask people to schedule up to about 36 hours a month or about 108 hours in a quarter so that they can be at the station. And so when the day-to-day type thing happens, we have crews that are there to be able to respond and take care of those. But we certainly have bigger incidents that happen. And when those bigger incidents that happen, all our firefighters are carrying pagers. And so we then notify everybody, and those that are able to come back to be able to help us with those significant events. Probably also not unique just to us, but 20 years ago, every community kind of did their own thing in the fire service. And if you had to call on a neighbor to help, sometimes it was looked at as a sign of weakness, like you couldn't do it yourself, right? And some of our senior members back in history will talk about, we just sucked it up and we all did our own thing, where today we cross boundaries all the time. And so as we're crossing boundaries from community to community, it's about making sure that we look at resources differently, because homes are built differently today than what they were before. And our resources are different today than what they were before. And so being able to work together and utilize resources effectively, utilize people effectively, it's a big difference, I think, of what we have.
Yeah, I think so. We've said as city managers, and I know other people that, fire emergencies, they don't have municipal boundaries.
Yeah.
And I think in some situations, in Eden Prairie, we might have a station that's closer to the Chan border than even Chan has, or there might be a tiny corner of Minnetonka that actually is a little bit closer to a part of EP than even we are. So, it'll be. I'd like to talk about trends that you see in the fire service, but before that, in terms of our model, so I'm imagining you described kind of our setup within that the people on our department. I know the answer to this, but I'll ask you. It's of all ages, right? And male and female, and all people with different kinds of careers. So when you think about people that have joined our fire department or might be interested in joining, it's pretty much every type of resident, isn't it?
It is very much. And I would say we have a lot of neat diversity in that younger and folks that may be a little bit more seasoned in their life and where they are, folks that are just maybe getting out of high school that are interested in a career in the emergency services or fire services field, male, female, really bring value to what we do, because I go back, and we'll maybe talk a little bit more about this later, but much of my career I spent as a paramedic. And so I've grown up kind of in this emergency services business. And I always talked about that when I worked as a paramedic and I had a female partner, there was some calls that we would go on that sometimes the last person that this patient or victim, if you will, wanted to talk to was another male. But to have a female partner was really valuable. Well, we can bring that same type of thing to the table with what we're doing at Eden Prairie Fire, because we've got some really neat, quality, effective, very professional, very well-trained female firefighters that can come to the table and provide something a little bit different than what I can.
Sure.
What that helps us with is not only the day-to-day things and maybe helping with a patient, but it also helps us with, as we think about what we're doing, different perspectives in how we think about our business and how we bring that to the table.
Yeah, and we have roughly anywhere from 8 to 10 to maybe 12 new people roughly every year, because you have people that retire or they move. They might move away, retire and move away. So when you have I think I'm right about that many new people.
Yeah.
And that it can be anything from I am in school and I'm younger and I might want to make this a career. So I'm going to start out being on the paid on-call Eden Prairie department to I'm mid-career and I'm an empty nester now and I always wanted to do this, male, female, right? So that's kind of that anyone listening out there, not that anybody could be on the Eden Prairie Fire Department, but really there are many, many different people that could be, right?
Yeah, very much so. And something that we continually try to do is put a program together that helps expose people to what do we have that we can offer and what might they be able to offer to us. As we continue to look forward with our recruitment process and how do we try to make sure that people know what might be available to them, we're still pretty fortunate as a community that we have people that are able and want to be able to do this. And as we look at recruitment going forward, how do we try to make sure that we're not getting too many, but we're getting the right people to be able to help us. And, our goal is to be able to put a sustainable recruitment plan in place annually. So for those who might be listening, our goal in 2020 is to be able to, as we complete 19 and begin into 2020, to be able to look at our current staffing model and our schedule and numbers of people that we have and the turnover that we might have and try to make sure that we keep that number where it is. As certainly but folks that may listening may not, we have an allocated number of our duty crew firefighters as 95. And so currently, the city's been very fortunate and good to us. We're a little bit above that number right now. Some communities around the state, you don't find that at all. They're way below where they should be. So again, I think we can feel fortunate as a community that we got people that want to serve and give. But we know that life changes, and you described a number of those. And so as we look forward, the goal is to be able to try to keep around that 95 number so we can be sustainable and effective in our response.
Good. Could you paint a picture for me about a call?
Yeah.
I'm trying to picture. I mean, we could do a couple different calls, right? Because we respond to some medicals and also people think about a house or a building on fire. There are fewer of those calls, but obviously you're ready for that. But just maybe for anyone interested, explain kind of the protocol and the procedure of a call.
Sure. Well, let's talk about calls in general. So
okay.
We go on about 2,000 calls a year. So you think about what types of calls might those be? They might be medical emergencies. They might be fires. They might be alarms. They might be an incident at a water, a beach or a lake incident, a crash on our highway. So there's lots of different diversity. And I think the all hazards approach of what we do today is certainly really valuable to the service that we provide. So let's just talk about a medical. Somebody's at home. They're having chest pain. They're having an issue of some type. How does that work in our city? So they would call to 911, or a family member calls to 911. We're fortunate in our city that we have our own 911 center, so our dispatchers answer that.
Right.
We have really highly trained dispatchers that are able to get some information and then look at what they have and then start the resources that we need. So in that response, it's a tiered response in our city. So our police respond, the fire department responds, and an ambulance responds. And our city is covered by Hennepin County Medical Center Ambulance Service. So all three of those go. And some might say, well, why all three? Is that an overabundance of what we need with resources? And I think one of the important things to remember is that in that part of the tiered response, police may be able to get there first because there's more of them out on the streets, and they're able to then provide that initial arriving assessment and start some patient care. Fire may arrive second, again, as we staff our stations with where we are. Crews are able to get out of the stations, travel down the roadway, get there, again, work seamlessly with our police officers to be able to help provide that initial assessment, taking things like maybe a blood pressure, a pulse, putting them on some oxygen, helping to determine what their issues might be. At the same time, not only are we dealing with a patient, but we might be dealing with a family member that's there. So not uncommon for one of our police officers or one of our firefighters to be able to then connect with a family member and explain to them what's going on, gather information about the person that might not be feeling well. What kind of medical history might they have? What kind of medications do they have? How long has this been going on? And grabbing some of that information. At the same time, now the ambulance is arriving. And so that ambulance comes in, paramedics on that ambulance bringing in information and equipment like an EKG machine and additional medications, where it's like the traveling hospital. Instead of it being in the ER, now we're in their bedroom or we're in their living room or their kitchen. And now we can start to, again, make more assessment information about what might be needed. Now, let's say the medical situation is more critical. So now we get ready to load that patient up on the ambulance, and we'll do that together with police and fire and the paramedics that are there, load them into the ambulance. And now let's say we're transporting to a hospital, Fairview Southdale, or we're transporting to a hospital downtown. But there's some additional care that might be needed in the back of that ambulance. Not uncommon for a firefighter then to be able to get in the ambulance with the paramedics and then travel with to be able to go and help provide that sustained care while they go to the hospital.
So, it paints a good picture. It's not just a truck going on scene,
Absolutely.
Start to finish. All right, so then the scenario of Johnny, our producer, he's in the basement. He's watching the Twins. It's a late game. He's lit a few candles have been lit. He falls asleep. Candle falls. Candle starts a fire. Johnny wakes up. Johnny freaks out. Johnny calls 911. The basement's on fire. What happens?
Well, if Johnny would have started the candles first, it would have probably been okay.
There's a whole thing about prevention that Johnny needs help with prevention. But we're past prevention right now with Johnny.
So we can't spend time there.
We're going to respond. Well, hopefully there are other people that learn from Johnny's mistake, now we're in the suppression mode.
All right, so now that same type of thing happens. The 911 gets called, the fire department gets notified, and again, police officers will come, and the fire department will come, and so that, again, part of that tiered response, the police generally will get there first. They'll help give us some initial information on the radio. We'll hear them with information about what might be happening, like, is there smoke coming out of the house? Are there flames coming out of the house? And as those initial arriving trucks come, it might be a fire engine. It might be a truck with a ladder on the top. And so as they arrive, they position themselves in a location that makes sense. And to the public, they might say, well, why are they parking in the middle of the street? Or why are they stopping short of the house or past the house? Those are all tactical decisions about how we try to deal with that incident the best we can.
Or why do I see Minnetonka and Edina there?
Absolutely.
How did they get there?
Yeah.
How does that happen?
Yeah. So that's part of that response system, again, about crossing boundaries, because depending on the type of call, not for every call, but let's say it comes in as a structure fire. So now Johnny got out of the house, but while Johnny's out of the house, there's flames coming out of those basement windows. So the dispatcher's taking that information out and know it's a structure fire. While our crews are responding, that gets upgraded to a different alarm level. So you may have heard, or others that might be listening may have heard on the news, that was a 2-alarm fire. That was a 3-alarm fire. So already built into a computer system, we have where we've sat down ahead of time and looked at resources to say, if we have this incident, who should automatically be started? So Edina, Minnetonka, Chanhassen, Chaska, Bloomington, depending on where we are, we're going to front load our resources to get as many people there as we can. Here's what we've learned more and more through science, that things burn hotter and faster than they ever did before. So the more resources we can put on a scene quicker, the less likelihood it is that we're going to see things escalate, and the safer it is for the firefighters to be able to be there. Super other important part that sometimes people don't understand is that we might have all these other officers showing up in a Tahoe or an SUV of some type, and you go, what are they all showing up for? Well, that's part of our command staff, and it might be not only Eden Prairie command staff, but it might be Bloomington or Edina or Minnetonka. So as they show up and park their SUV in somebody's driveway, so that's to not block the driveway or the roadway so that the trucks can get in, then their job is to be able to help make sure to do what we would call a 360 or a size up. Look all the way around that house. For instance, in Johnny's basement or from the front of Johnny's house, you might not see at all that there's any type of sliding glass door to get out through the basement. So we know that the fire's in Johnny's basement, but you can't tell that from the front. But when I walk around the back of Johnny's house, I can see the sliding glass door. So now I can reposition our crews to go from the back instead of coming through the front. Safer for our folks to be able to do that.
Sure.
Now, that command staff's going to come back out. They're going to oftentimes sit in their vehicle, and they're going to then manage or command the fire from out there. Here's a great story from back in history. Way back in the day, if you talk to some of our more senior retired firefighters, it was not uncommon for a firefighter to show up and be in command, to stand outside with a portable radio, sometimes working, sometimes not working, telling people what to be able to do in an environment where it was really hard to manage that. So we've learned a lot through the years that now we ask our incident commander to go back and sit in the vehicle. And to some people, they would say, well, what's that guy doing? Or what's that gal doing? She's just sitting in the car. Why aren't they out there with the others? With their gear? It's cold. It's hot. Well, get out there to work with your troops. Well, you make better decisions by being in an environment that's closer to, and closed, and better decisions get made that way.
And and that makes me think, too, when you talked about years ago, how you attack a fire, right, has changed a lot in the last couple decades about, wasn't there the concept of just everyone charge in, everybody in, and just there's different ways you go about fighting fire now too, right?
Very much so. And there are tactical decisions that those incident commanders and first crews decide about. Are we going into that house in an offensive mode? Or are we staying outside in a defensive mode? Can we knock the fire down first? Here's, again, kind of a story from the past. In the past, it was if you put water on the fire from the outside the house, you were going to push it all the way through the house. Well, what we know today is that really doesn't happen. And so now to put a little fire from the outside before you go in will actually cool down that environment and make it safer for our folks to go in. Now, again, all that's done tactically, and we train regularly to be able to make sure that our folks have those kinds of decision-making abilities to do that.
Sure. And, we talked about Johnny earlier and the mistakes he made on the front end in terms of prevention, but when you talk about prevention too, one thing you said is that the materials that are in homes now burn hotter and faster, but at the same time I think there's a push nationally to sprinkle buildings and have code requirements for buildings, so I think even as we get new development, that's probably assisting our infrastructure or our housing stock and building stock in Eden Prairie too, right? It's
absolutely helping, especially when we talk about our multifamily buildings that we're seeing built, and the development that as we see development not only in Eden Prairie go single family, but we see multifamily and going up. We're very fortunate in our state and our city that we have codes that require them to put residential sprinklers in and make it safer. That's not necessarily the same case in all the individual homes. And so individual homes, like your home and my home, may not have a sprinkler system in them. And so we still see differences there. I think as we continue to learn, science has become a bigger and bigger part of the fire service. It used to be that when you went through the front door to go put the fire out, you just left the door open. What we're learning now, United Laboratories has done lots of extensive research to be able to talk about, hey, close the door. And so even when we crawl in with a fire hose, we're closing the door behind us now where we didn't. And so now if you were to go out on the internet now and look at some prevention tips out there, a lot of prevention tips about sleep with your door closed. And what we've seen is that if you and I go to bed at night, close our door, that even if there's a fire in the house, the chance of it being survivable in our bedroom is much better than what it was if you leave that door open and now everything comes into the bedroom. So lots of good changes, I think, that we're seeing.
New in equipment. Can you talk a little bit about equipment, some of the equipment that our fire department has or has acquired in the last few years that probably helps a little bit?
So we are super fortunate in this community, supported by a community and by a council that supports what we do financially. And so we have really good fire apparatus that include engines and ladder trucks and utility vehicles that help us provide those types of services. Our state-of-the-art fire engines allow us to be able to bring people to the scene safely, as well as when they get there to have equipment, our hoses to be able to pull off and to be able to supply the water supplies that we need. A lot of people don't think about it, not directly related to our fire equipment, but another piece of our city that sometimes people don't think about. We have fire hydrants all over our community. And our water department in the city manages all that. And so our utilities being able to make sure that when we hook up to one of those red fire hydrants, that they work and we've got water to be able to help put the fire out. People take that for granted, but in a community like ours, we're really fortunate that we have that. We have state-of-the-art equipment when it comes to self-contained breathing apparatus. So the packs that you put over the firefighter's back, state-of-the-art that we have, and we're actually just in the process now of replacing those. And so we get up to the current standards with where we are. We have state-of-the-art equipment when it comes to rescue equipment. We have a lot of highways that come through and roadways just in particular that come through. We have a number of crashes that happen, unfortunately, in our community, and so it's to be prepared for making sure that we can cut people out of vehicles. As cars are built better and better today, and they've got more safety features in them, like airbags and seat belts and all the things, there's now electric cars and different things that operate differently. We have to think about how we're going to use our extrication tools. Again, we're super fortunate that we have those kinds of things to be able to do that. We have thermal imaging cameras that seem like they're certainly state-of-the-art, but can look into a wall and look where heat might be, help make determinations about where we might go. So really fortunate, I think, as a community that we have those tools.
Sure. And I think when we talked earlier about partnerships too, are we seeing where even across jurisdictions that agencies, cities are trying to get similar equipment too, amongst agencies? I think that's a newer thing too, like partnering on purchases or even having compatible equipment.
Absolutely. So that when we buy things, maybe not only is it about price and maybe we get some purchasing power, but standardization so that if something happens to our neighbor in Minnetonka or Chanhassen, they might have the same equipment. So if we have to help use that or we're using their equipment, we can do that. I also think we continue to get smarter about, hey, maybe we don't have this in Eden Prairie, but they do have that in Bloomington. And now they share that with us, and maybe we share that with them. For example, Bloomington and Minnetonka have air trucks that they can bring to the scene and help fill self-contained breathing apparatus air bottles on a scene. We don't have one of those in the city of Eden Prairie, but we have a life safety trailer, and our life safety trailer is one of 8 that exists in Hennepin County that can go to another community to be able to help with firefighter health and safety, so that we're learning more and more that as firefighters really are like athletes when they're going through these. And so how do we make sure that we take care of them? How do we rehabilitate them after they've gone through a fire to make sure that we send them all home? I can tell you as the fire chief that I want to make sure everybody goes home at the end of the day. I don't want to have to knock on somebody's door and say that they're not. So we're really fortunate that we've got those types of things that we're able to share.
Good. You remember early in the interview I said it feels like you've been here a lot longer than 4 months?
Yeah.
Well, based on the last 15 minutes of conversation, that sounds like you've absorbed quite a bit in your period of time here.
Great people that have helped me learn a lot.
Well,
absolutely.
you're on top of things, and I do want to talk about from where you came from, because you are new to Eden Prairie. So can you talk a little bit about your career prior, where you were and where you've worked. I'd like to hear a little bit more about your background.
Sounds great. So I live in Chaska with my family. Okay. I've spent almost all of my 34-year career doing public safety of some type. As I said a little bit earlier, I started my career in the EMS, or Emergency Medical Services area, working as a paramedic. Spent much of my time out at Ridgeview Medical Center out in Waconia, where not only did I work on the ambulance, but part of my time I also worked in EMS education. And so that's where I started to get more of my taste about the fire service, as I was doing training with fire departments and training with police departments. And so understanding the broader nature of what that brought to the table. I was able to then change careers, and in 1993 I went to work for Carver County as the Risk and Emergency Management Director for the county, where I got a chance to not only still do some of that paramedic stuff on a part-time basis, but then do safety and risk and emergency management stuff for Carver County. I would certainly, with some bias, tell you that I was able to help build a program that was really good there and make it better, to be able to help build that emergency management and risk management program up. And then in 2006, I was really fortunate enough to be able to get hired at the Excelsior Fire District as the fire chief. And I had been there the last 12 and a half years before I came here. Now, during that same time in Carver County and during some of the same time in Excelsior, in my Carver County time, I actually got a chance to join the fire department with the city of Chaska. A little story there going back to the Chaska Fire Department. Okay. While I was doing emergency management stuff, I would respond on bigger incidents with fire departments all through Carver County. And so I was doing training and different things, and Chaska Fire would often be on me about, why don't you join the fire department? Or, hey, why don't you come be a part of what we're doing? And I got enough going on. I don't need to do it. Yeah. It was one day where my wife said, you're doing it anyway. Why don't you go join? Probably one of the best things, and she's been super supportive in my career all the way through, but it got a chance to be able to do that, and that certainly has helped open up a number of the doors that have been in place and are here today.
Sure.
So again, spending the last 12 years with the Excelsior Fire District, a little bit different operation, certainly than what we have here in the city of Eden Prairie. Excelsior Fire District was a joint powers organization made up of 5 cities along the southern part of Lake Minnetonka. About 40 firefighters there, paid on call. Not the same. We didn't staff our stations the same way as what we did here. We had some duty crew components that we were doing there.
Okay.
And then responded to about 850 calls for service there with 2 fire stations in that area. My time in Chaska Fire, I spent about 22 years there. Just this last January, I retired from there after I spent 22 years. Loved what I did there. And again, I think was able to help make a difference in that community as well. So, and certainly now here doing what I'm doing.
And I think as you said to me when you were in Excelsior, you had, it was mainly fire, and it was in multiple cities. And here in Eden Prairie, it's also inspections, and it's a little broader, and we're a little bit bigger, but it's just one community. But so I know there's some differences there. But
yeah, you want certainly bigger, as a community compared to our 5 littler communities. I have one boss, right, as we sit here today, one person to be able to report to, rather than our 5 communities. And I had a great relationship with our 5 communities. But as you can imagine, 25 council members and mayors in all 5 of those cities, and city managers and city administrators.
I can't imagine that. No.
Yeah, so.
And in that time, too, you were deployed to some, natural disasters throughout the country.
I've been super fortunate in my time.
Yeah, where have you been?
If you'd have told me that I'd have been worried about hurricanes in my career as a guy growing up in Minnesota, I said, nah, hurricanes don't really fit here. But certainly I was deployed to Hurricane Katrina and Rita back in 2005, 2006. That was part of a team. I helped lead a team of firefighters from Minnesota down to Cameron Parish, Louisiana. Spent a couple weeks down there providing fire coverage for them after Hurricane Katrina and Rita came through. Cameron Parish, a parish is a county in Louisiana. So from one end to the other in Cameron Parish was about an hour north to south, and it was about an hour east to west. So a really big geographical area, not a lot of population. It was in the area that had some of the direct hit from Katrina and Rita, and so the tidal surge had come through and gone about 30 miles inland. So it was a mess when we were there.
What were you guys doing when you were there?
Our primary responsibility while we were there was to provide fire coverage in that in that entire parish, while their responders and their folks who lived there either weren't there anymore or they were working to be able to recover. So our team of 12, and we had 12 firefighters from different areas around the state that went with us as part of a team to be able to provide that coverage.
So a lot of people were leaving, a lot of people were evacuated. What would be some of the calls? What were you managed?
We didn't have a lot of calls for service. It was really about being there in case, because there wasn't any. We used their fire apparatus.
Okay.
We did a lot of things about trying to just get their fire stations a little bit back to as normal as they could be. Certainly they had a lot of damage to them.
Yeah.
We did get calls for fires because as they turned electricity back on in different areas, there were things that would start on fire. We had some calls for medical emergencies that would happen. But by and large, we weren't significantly busy. So that was one of the deployments. I had an opportunity also with Hurricane Sandy to spend some time in Massachusetts and in New York State in their EOC. Both of those times, it was more of an emergency operations center deployment to be able to help them prepare and respond to the hurricanes that were coming in. And then the most recent deployment that I had out of state was Hurricane Irma, where there was, again, a team of 16 of us from the state of Minnesota, part of the all-hazard incident management team that deployed down to Florida.
Florida Keys?
We ended up all the way into the Keys. We started and got deployed, and we were supposed to just kind of we were staged originally in Birmingham, Alabama, and then we were going to be moved to Tallahassee, Florida. They called and asked for ready to go, and pretty soon before we knew it, we were moving not to Tallahassee, but all the way to the Keys. So one of those really unique situations. And one of my big takeaways from Florida was really about when we got down to the Keys, it was some of the worst devastation that I've seen. No power. The sanitary infrastructure really wasn't there. There was really a lack of food and water. And so all those basic necessities that we need and think about every day, they were at a spot where they didn't have a lot of that there. And so I'm proud to be part of our team that was down there. We ended up being part of a group that helped to set up and operate points of distribution. And we set up those points of distribution throughout the Keys all the way up and down. And we're able to help every day to deliver food and water to the residents to be able to help make that sustainable in the first few weeks while they were trying to recover from that incident.
And I know that Minnesota has a pretty good history of deploying to these areas throughout the country. Were you able to meet or see people that came from other states as well?
Absolutely.
Was there kind of just assistance that was happening from public safety agencies from across the country? Because I would hope in the case of Minnesota that the favor would be returned.
Absolutely. All over the country, you have a chance to be able to interact with people, and it's you develop some pretty neat relationships that are sustainable today. And I think that is there's two key takeaways from that. The state of Minnesota has a really awesome reputation across the country of being able to provide really good people that will work hard and do what needs to be done. And the second part of that is when something does happen, and certainly, knock on wood, that we don't have anything major that happens in our communities ever, but if something does happen, we know that we will get people from other states and other parts of the country that will come in to be able to help us.
Sure.
Quality, really good people.
Good. Well, I think we want to get to know you a little bit more as well personally. So I've played this game with a few other people who've been on the podcast before, and it's called This or That.
I'm ready.
Okay, so you've got a choice to make. You just have to pick, what your preference is so the listeners can get a little bit of a feel for you, Scott. So I'm just going to throw some different stuff at you, and you pick your preference, okay?
All
right. You ready?
I'm ready.
Singing or dancing?
I don't sing very well, so I better say dance.
Oceans or mountains?
Mountains.
That was pretty quick.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Just got back from a little trip in Colorado.
Okay.
Yeah.
So a little bit of hiking and up in the mountain. Yeah.
Love that fresh mountain air to be able to spend some time outside.
Nice. Pizza or burgers?
Ooh, burger.
Summer or winter?
Summer.
TV or movies?
TV. It's got to be a sports thing, probably, though. My wife would tell you for sure it's a sports thing, not a movie.
So that's why TV more so?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the last time I asked somebody about that, we went on for a little bit about Game of Thrones and some of the different TV shows. But for you, sports, what sports on TV?
I'm kind of an anything sports guy. Kind of just a sports nut.
Yeah.
We'll certainly, if it's watching a movie or watching the Twins play baseball, I'm going to watch the Twins play baseball. So thankfully we have a couple of TVs in our house, because sometimes the Hallmark Channel is on one TV and there's a Twins game on another.
Yeah, I can relate to that with either HGTV or The Handmaid's Tale, or just a number of shows are on one TV and live sports are on another. But speaking of sports, though, so we talked about you being on Chaska Fire, but you also were and still are involved in Chaska sports, right?
I am.
Because you're a baseball guy in Chaska.
I am. I have been really fortunate to be one of the assistant baseball coaches with Chaska High School Baseball. I have two sons, and both played baseball. One played up through middle school. The other one played up through high school and into college. And so I was able to coach while they were younger. And then when Mitch left to go to college, I missed coaching, and I've had an opportunity.
Do his podcast.
Yeah, now he's doing his podcast. See how far he's come?
Yeah.
And his dad now helping to do a podcast. Who would have thought?
Anybody can do a podcast.
I am fortunate to be one of the high school baseball coaches with Chaska High School, and it's a chance for me to be able to help kind of fill my bucket in a different way. And I don't need to be the head coach. We have a great head coach Craig Bauman is the head coach of the Chaska High School baseball program. I get to be the head coach of the fire department here, and there get a chance to be able to hopefully mentor young men, to be able to help them with not only what happens on the baseball field, but really what I think so much of sports is what happens in life, and things that go well and things that maybe don't go well, and how do we work through those.
Sure. How did they do this year?
Chaska Hawks had our ending wasn't necessarily as positive wins and losses, but I always talk about the how did you do measurement really comes from what kind of impact did we make. And so I think the impact to be able to try to how do we look at lessons and where they are. So season-wise, maybe not as many wins and losses, but it's from a section standpoint. We competed in the section. We play against really good teams, and it was, again, another really fun season for me as we get a chance to play. Not only do I get to be the fire chief in Eden Prairie, but we get to play Eden Prairie in baseball, and so that was fun. This year we were able to do we did the veterans game. We did the strikeout canter or veterans game during the Eden Prairie game, and it was fun to be able to not only have we did the veterans game because we had first responders and veterans that were both Eden Prairie and Chaska folks that were at that game. Pretty neat to be able to be part of the MC that puts that all together and help make that fit. So a little plug though, last year I helped coach the Chaska VFW baseball team, which is the younger guys in the summer. And last year we won the state tournament for the state of Minnesota. So that was pretty fun. And they just qualified to go back to that state tournament again. So that a little bit different group of people, but same head coach. They're taking that group back up to Brainerd to try to defend that title again this year. So that'll be fun. Yeah.
Good for them. Back to this or that.
Okay.
Sneakers or flip-flops?
Sneakers.
A phone call or a text?
A phone call.
Work hard or play hard?
Ooh, that's a both. Can't be both.
No. You gotta pick one.
Work hard.
Okay. As a baseball coach, you like to see a home run or a strikeout?
Home run.
Fire prevention or fire suppression?
I'm a prevention guy.
Okay, I knew you. That would be, No, I know you are. I know you are. I just try to throw you off.
Yeah, no, that's good. But I think, certainly the firefighters, as they train and have the skills, they want to be able to use those skills, but nobody wants their house to burn, so we'll try to prevent it.
No, I get that. I get that.
Yeah.
But there's somewhat the misnomer about, maybe from my perspective as a city manager, never going out on a call is probably the best thing that could happen. But I know that sometimes there is the excitement of the work and the training, but obviously it's all about keeping people safe.
Yeah, trying to, when somebody has their worst day, you're trying to help make their worst day just a little bit better. And the skills that we learn and go through, people, to use those skills effectively, that's certainly rewarding for our firefighters as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, Scott, I appreciate you coming in here so early in your tenure and talking about Eden Prairie Fire and a little bit about your background. I think this is an opportunity for people involved at Eden Prairie to get to know you a little bit because you're relatively new, even though if you listen to the podcast, it sounds like you've been here a long time. But I appreciate you coming in for the conversation.
I appreciate the invite. Let's do it again a couple years down the road and see what's changed, what's new, and maybe I could do this and that with you.
No,
Oh.
that's not going to happen.
All right.
There's the park and rec director thinks he's going to do that as well, and that's not going to happen. But I'll absolutely have you back.
Awesome.
We will. Yeah, you'll be back on. Thanks, Scott.
Thanks, Rick.